everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to see if I can predict the 20 nominees in the fantasy category of the Goodreads Choice Awards this year. I did attempt this last year. I would say I failed at it. You would think I would maybe go with a more structured approach, because obviously guessing purely based on vibes did not go my way last year, and yet we're kind of doing a vibes approach again this year. But if you do want to see somebody who has thought this through, comes with the stats and the evidence to back her claims, I would totally recommend Julie's reading. She just posted her video. I have not watched it yet because I did not want to be influenced, but I'm going to leave it down below. So I think before I tell you what my 20 nominees are, I think we'll just generally go over my thought process of it. The very first thing I do is very self-absorbed, some might say, because I look at my shelves. And I go, okay, what did I like this year? And in fairness, it did give me a couple of ideas, or authors that maybe I didn't read the book that they have out this year, but I was like, oh, I think they had a book out this year. And so it prompted me to go look and double check that. Then I usually check some Goodreads lists. Then I usually check just other fantasy websites. And then I go and I check the previous years. I usually go maybe 3 or 4 years back and see what has been nominated. So that is the general gist of how I do it. I will say things have gotten a lot harder with the addition of the romantasy category, because there's some that I just don't know where they fit. There was a couple of books that I didn't know about, age range. I didn't know whether it was fantasy or romantasy, and or whether it was some other speculative. Let's actually now get into it. Very first pick that I am putting down is going to be Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. This was the first one that I wrote down. I didn't even have to think about it because I am a huge V.E. Schwab fan. I have an entire V.E. Schwab shelf right here. I have 4 copies of this book. A Limerick, Owl Crate, Fairy Loot, Standard. They were right in my eyeline while I was making the list. I would be shocked if V.E. Schwab did not make the list. Her last release, which is The Fragile Threads of Power, made the list. Her one before that, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, I think it came second the year it came out. This book is toxic lesbian vampires, but in reality it's about 3 women. We kind of start with Alice, who is a Scottish girl living in Boston, and she wakes up and discovers that she is a vampire, and then we kind of go back in time and see how these 3 lives have all intermingled to get them where they are now. So book number 2 that I'm adding to the list is going to be A Drop of Corruption by Robert Jackson Bennett. This is the first book in the series, The Tainted Cup. The second book came out this year. Again, this was one that I chose because I looked at my shelves and I was like, you're a hyped book. I went, I checked the ratings. The first book also got nominated last year, so again, a pretty easy pick for me. This one is a fantasy mystery series which follows Anna and Din, mostly Din. He is her assistant, and she is very eccentric, and so he has to go out to the crime scenes, get all of the information. He does this because he has a magic that makes him an engraver, which means he can use smells to remember every single detail. Book number 3 that I'm going to predict is going to be Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales, which is the 3rd and final book in the Emily Wilde series. Again, another one I haven't read yet, but I will be reading soon. I think the paperback is out this month. This series follows Emily, and she is a professor of fairy folklore, and she sets off to visit a village that has a very distinct type of fairy folklore, and then her annoying co-worker Wendell shows up and makes everything so much worse for her. I have really enjoyed this series. I actually read the first one because I read all of the nominees the year that this was nominated. This was also nominated last year, so again, a pretty easy one. I looked at my shelves, I saw it was the 3rd book came out this year. It has a decent number of ratings. The first 2 were nominated. Easy enough choice. Number 4 is Calabasas by R.F. Kuang. So again, another one I looked while I was looking at my shelves. I saw my Poppy War series. I haven't actually read any other R.F. Kuang books except for the Poppy War, which I liked. I gave, I think, all of them 4 stars. This is her release this year. It only came out a month or 2 ago. I believe it is about a PhD student maybe who accidentally sends her professor to hell, and she has to go down after him. And I know that at first a lot of people were trying to paint it as her romantasy, or her take on romantasy, and when the book came out people were if you go into this expecting romantasy, you will be let down immensely. And so I don't think it will be in the romantasy category. I do think it will be in the fantasy category, but I do think there's a little bit of romance in there. I think Babel was second the year that it came out, so I feel again, another pretty easy one to predict. So then the next one is The Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson. I think this is one that some people might forget is eligible this year because that came out the end of last year. And in fairness, I feel like I haven't heard as many people talking about this as like, I remember when Rhythm of War came out, everyone was talking about it. I feel like this one dwindled a bit. Obviously, it still has an insane amount of ratings, so that doesn't matter. And when I was, again, I looked at my shelf, I saw Brandon Sanderson, I was like, I'm pretty sure that came out at the end of last year, double checked, yeah, huge amount of ratings, easy to put on the list. I actually don't even know what the Stormlight Archives is about. I know I have to read it eventually, but I haven't gotten there yet. Number 6 that I'm predicting is The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. This is his first book in a new series, and again, it's a grimdark fantasy. I think it's a ragtag bunch of people that are brought together by, I think, a priest. I have read the first Law trilogy. I didn't love it, so I'm not sure if this is going to be for me, because I feel like most people are like, well, it's very similar to his other stuff. It's like a fairly adult pick. I think their first one for their Epic box. So I knew that it had come out. I knew that a lot of people had been reading it. And so I double checked and I added it to the list because, again, a pretty hyped book. Book number 7 that I'm going to add onto the list is The Strength of the Few by James Islington, which is the sequel to The Will of the Many. And this made the cut 2 years ago when it came out. It didn't make the top 10, but it was definitely impacted by the fact it came out in November, which is the same for the second one. So I do think it will make the cut to be allowed into the Goodreads Choice Awards, but I do think it's at a distinct disadvantage. But it has like, I think 120,000 people have it marked as want to read, which is an insane number. And I think Goodreads would obviously be very foolish not to take that into account. Like, yes, this came out in 2023, but I think 2024 was when it really started to get big. And so a lot of people have been very anticipating the sequel. So I feel like this could do pretty good in the Goodreads Choice Awards as well. Like, people won't be after reading it, but I think they might vote for it anyway because they'll be so excited for it. So this is set in an academy, and we follow our main character, who's like a teenage boy who is an orphan but was taken in by this man who kind of taught him the ways so that he could infiltrate this academy and spy. But our main character has his own reasons that he wants to go there, and all of this has to do with the magic system that involves siphoning will up through like the levels. 8 that I have down is The Raven Scholar, and this one, I can think, at this point of the list I was like, okay, I have way too many like established authors on this list, which obviously they have the people who have it down as want to read or have already read it. They have loyal fan bases. They have built a name for themselves. But there is always a couple that get in that I've never heard of before or are new to the fantasy genre. It's a debut. It has about 17,000 ratings. So again, that's like absolutely not shabby. It is a debut, and Goodreads does like to put a few of them on there. It is also one that I do actually really want to read. So number 9 is Hemlock and Silver by T. Kingfisher. So this is her Snow White retelling, I believe. And T. Kingfisher is another frequent flyer on the list of the Goodreads Choice Awards. She was nominated last year for When a Sorceress Comes to Call. She was nominated the year before for Nettle and Bone. If she has a fantasy book out, she is pretty often nominated. And same with horror. I haven't read this one yet, but I have slowly been making my way through all of T. Kingfisher's backlist, so I do have to read this one. Number 10 is The River Has Roots by Amal Motar. This one, I remember when it was announced, seeing a lot of hype towards it, and also like when it came out, I think I saw quite a bit. But since then, I don't think I've heard as much about it. This was one that I saw on one of the Goodreads lists. I checked and it had like a decent enough readership, so I think it should get in. A lot of my list is sequels or very well-established authors. Not saying that Amal El-Motar isn't, like, not a debut author or anything like that, but not as prominent and not as frequently seen on Goodreads Choice Awards. So I think, you know, a bit of a fresher face to add into the bunch. Number 11 I have as Watermoon, and I'm not going to lie, this was one of the last ones I kind of nearly added in because I didn't know this was fantasy until I looked at one of the Goodreads lists. In my head, this was sci-fi. Like, the cover to me screamed sci-fi, and then I was scrolling through the list, one of their like 2025 fantasy release lists, and there it was, and I was like, that's not fantasy, and I clicked into it and I was like, oh, that synopsis does actually seem like it's a fantasy book. And that would have been really silly of me. It has like 38,000 people have read it, and I've heard pretty good reviews for it overall, but as I said, I obviously was not paying attention to what it was actually about when I heard anyone talking about it. So number 12 is Brigands and Bread Knives by Travis Baldree. So again, this is one where the first and second book have also featured in the Goodreads Choice Awards. Obviously the first book is Legends and Lattes, which follows Viv, who is an orc who was like a mercenary and has put down the axe and has decided to start a coffee shop. The second book was a prequel that follows a bookshop, and now this one, I think it's actually more plot and not as cozy, and it is going to like bring the two books kind of together. Personally, I don't love these books, they're not for me, but I do know that they are really well loved. Again, this one is, I think, at a bit of a disadvantage, like with The Strength of the Few, because it is not out yet. It is, I think it's out the same day as The Strength of the Few. And so I do think it will still make the cut, because there's, again, I think there's over 50,000 people have it as want to read. So Goodreads will take that into account, and the first two have made it. So I think it should make the cut. We're going to stick with ones that are very fresh releases. And for number 13, we're going to go with Empire of Dawn by Jay Kristoff. And if I'm being 100% honest, I mean, the same applies to this as The Strength of the Few and Brigands and Bread Knives, but also I think added the factor that Jay Kristoff like had a massive crash out, like when the first book of this series wasn't nominated, which I get because it had a lot of ratings. So I get why he felt left out. They made sure to include the second book, and so I think they're going to include the third one as well. It has like over 50,000 people want to read it though, so they'll take that into account. That series follows like a vampire hunter. I think they're like Silver Saints or something, and he is like imprisoned. I think he's the last of them, and he is told to like tell his life story, and there's something to do with Holy Grail, I think, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm not really interested in the series, if I'm being 100% honest. Nevernight wasn't really my thing, so it's kind of put me off trying anything else. Number 14 that I'm going to talk about is Alchemy of Secrets by Stephanie Garber. So this is her adult debut. She has obviously written the Caraval series and the spin-off series. I didn't even know this was coming out, but I went into Waterstones like last month or 2 months ago, last month, and I thought like it had a big table for it with like a really nice edition of it, and I was like, oh, I've never even heard of that book. And then I saw Stephanie Garber. I kind of then forgot about it, if I'm being honest. I read one of her books before and I gave it a 3-star, and so I kind of forgot about it. And then when I was making this list and I was scrolling through one of those 2025 fantasy releases, I saw it again and I was like, I've seen that somewhere. And then it came back to me and I looked, and it has a lot of ratings for a pretty new release. She hasn't been nominated in the adult fantasy category. She has been nominated in the YA fantasy category before, so it wouldn't surprise me. And as I said, it's doing very well, especially for a debut adult. And again, that kind of a fresher face in the adult fantasy space getting into one of the slots. So then number 15 I have down as Among Burning Flowers by Samantha Shannon. This is another prequel in the Priory of the Orange Tree series. This is technically a novella. I think it's like over 200 pages by like a good bit. Like, so stretching a novella, let's say. I almost didn't put this down, and then I kind of stopped myself and I was like, why wouldn't it make the list? I think in my head, I have not heard anyone really talking about it, and the first two books in that series, when those came out, there was so much buzz. I just haven't heard people talking about this one the same way, and that kind of gave me pause. And then I obviously looked at the ratings and I was like, oh, it's really not doing that bad. So we're at the point where I started to really struggle with what to put down. Next, at 16, I have down The Ragpicker King by Cassandra Clare. And this one, I'm not sure about, if I'm being 100% honest. The first book in this series did make the Goodreads Choice Awards. This is Cassandra Clare. The first book is Swordcatcher. That is her adult debut. It follows, I think, a couple of points of views. One of them is like the body double for the prince, and the other is like a healer whose magic is actually outlawed. And I know that the two of them have to work together for some reason. I do want to read this eventually, but I'm kind of afraid. Cassandra Clare was such an important author to me as a teen, and I'm afraid to read her adult debut because I feel like if I read her adult debut, like, I'm going to finish the Shadowhunter Chronicles anyway. Like, the Wicked Powers is the last series, so I'm going to finish those because I am a completionist and they have been such a like big part of my reading journey. But I haven't read her adult debut yet because it feels like if I don't like her adult debut, it is kind of going to be me saying, well, once Shadowhunters is done, I'm done with Cassandra Clare, and that makes me feel very grown up. That is not this point of this video. I haven't read the first book is the point of that, but it was nominated, and also most of her YAs I think get nominated in the YA fantasy category. Now, there isn't a huge number of readers, especially since this came out earlier in the year. Like, it's about the 17,000 mark, which is the same as a lot of books that I have on this list, but a lot of those books are newer than this. So I do think that might be stretching it a little, but I do think it's going to make it. And I don't know why, except gut reaction. And I think Cassandra Clare does have a fairly loyal readership. So there's probably so many people that have this as want to read, even if they haven't even read the first book. So I think that might make it so that it makes the list. I think we're up to 17 now, but I have down The Incandescent by Emily Tesh. To be honest, as I said, at this point, we're like scraping the bottom of the barrel. This doesn't have a lot of reviews, but there's always a couple that sneak in there. And so I think it's going to be this one. I think she has a fantasy novella, which I don't think was nominated, but I think her sci-fi book was nominated for the Goodreads Choice Awards. So not a complete stranger to the Goodreads Choice Awards. It does have a nice cover. I don't know what it's about. I just saw it. I was like, that seems like a bit of an out there pick. And there's always a couple. So I'm going to put it down. Purely that is the reason why. I just like, there's always a surprise. I think this could be a surprise. Down as number 18, I have The Everlasting by Alex E. Harrow. This is a new release. It does not have a lot of ratings. I think it had, at the time that I made the list, it had less than 2,000. Maybe it's gone over that by now. So it's pushing it, but it is only just out. And it probably has a lot more people have it down as want to read, and probably, as I'm speaking, it probably might be over 2,000 at this point, because Alex E. Harrow, again, a pretty well-loved author. Darling House was nominated 2 years ago when that came out, and I'm not sure, I think Once Future Witches was also nominated the year it came out. So again, a frequent flyer on the Goodreads Choice Awards list. If I'm being 100% honest, I didn't remember she had anything coming out this year. I put this down was because I was checking the winners from 2 years ago, and I saw Alex E. Harrow, and I was like, I know she had like that novella thing out, but I said I don't think she has like a full-length novel. And I checked and I was like, oh, she does. At number 19, I have A Resistance of Witches, and if I'm being 100% honest, I don't remember a single thing about this book. I don't know why I put it down. I was really struggling at this point. I can't even remember what the cover looks like, but I think it had a decent chunk of ratings. That's why I put it down. Yeah, I can't find it anywhere on my sheet, so I don't know why I put this down. I don't know how many ratings it has. I don't remember what the cover looked like. I think it had a decent number of ratings. Then I was like, I have never heard of this book. I'm very surprised by this. So I think that's why. And I can't even remember who the author was, but I don't think they were someone who had been nominated before. And I kind of, oh yeah, that might be why. I was like, okay, there's too many people on this list who have been nominated before. I need somebody who's like fresh. I think that might be why. And so that brings us to our last pick. And if I'm being honest, if I was doing this logically and with a game plan, I would probably be putting down, I think it's like The Society of Unknowable Objects by Gareth something. He wrote The Book of Doors, which was nominated last year. I had never heard of it before, and it got in. And he has also released a book this year. So I think if I was being logical, I would pick that, or maybe pick, like as I said, one of those ones that maybe I'm like, oh, is it fantasy? Is it not? But I have instead decided for my very last pick, I'm choosing what I want to be nominated. So this one is purely a manifestation spot. This is not what I think. Like, I do think it has a chance of appearing. It wouldn't surprise me if it was there, but I'm not particularly confident in it. And so I'm using this spot as a way to tell you to go read The Summer War by Naomi Novik. Novik has appeared before on the list. So again, that does bode well. It's a fairly new. It doesn't have a lot of ratings, but it is a newer book. So again, that helps its case. But I'm not sure there's going to be enough behind it to get it in, if I'm being 100% honest. But I read this like the day it came out, and I gave it a really high 4-star. There was just like one or two really small things, but I really, really loved it. It is such a perfect little fairy tale. The writing style just so perfectly matches that. I think that's something that constantly blows me away about Naomi Novik, is her ability to change her writing style depending on what she is writing. So she will be writing, like in the Temera series, it is very formal, very of the Regency era. Then in Identity Education, we are very much stuck in a character's head, and she is very much in her own head. And it's very stream of consciousness, like she is just ranting at you. And then in this one, it is such a beautiful fairy tale, very atmospheric. and like a bit poetic and all of that. And I just really, really like this. This follows Celia, and on the day that her oldest brother leaves, she discovers she has magic because she accidentally puts a curse on him so that he will never be able to find love. And so her brother sets off to be the greatest knight that has ever lived, and she spends her years trying to see if she can undo the curse with the help of her unwanted middle brother. And then eventually the Summer War, which has ended at this point, starts to kind of haunt them, and the siblings might have to come together again. And as I said, so this is my manifestation spot. This is going to make the list. So those are the 20 that I am predicting. Tell me what I have missed, because I know you're going to be like, how could you have forgotten about this? And I'm going to be like, you're so right. How could I have forgotten about that? So let me know down below. And I think that is all. So thank you guys so much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, subscribe. And I will see you all in the next one. Bye.